Welcome, everyone. We're very pleased to have you all here with us today. We're a lot of people who have been working on this and are very pleased to share our inspiration catalog for policy measures, enabling in optimized use of the existing building stock with you. We have a very nice, we think, agenda ahead of us, so we'll jump straight into it. We'll put some housekeeping rules in the chat, and they're very normal. And we also put the agenda so you can follow there. We will start with just who is actually Nordic Sustainable Construction, a bit about the whole catalog, and then we'll have a deep dive into the 5 thematic areas that we have defined. There's a lot of really good presentations. I am definitely looking very much forward to them. And then in the end, there's opportunities for questions and answers, and then we'll finish and thank you all. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will look through them as we go along, but we'll only have questions and answers in the end because there's not much time to each of the presentations, but we did want to go a bit further into the depth with some of the examples and some of the cases. So I hope you're all ready. The Nordic Sustainable Construction springs from this Nordic version. The Nordic countries wants to be the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. And to reach this goal, the construction sector has to change. Therefore, the Nordic ministers made a declaration back in 2023, focusing on several elements, but the one we want to pinpoint here, and the one that this catalog is really supporting, is that they recognize the potential in preserving and developing the existing building stock. And therefore, they wanted us to start this Nordic Sustainable Construction. And we have these 3 work packages in our program, and the one you'll be listening about today and we'll get more information about is the circularity work package, where we have this task of looking on how we can increase the floor area optimization, the lifetime extension of buildings, and transformation. So this is what we've been trying to work on. Participants today, at least those registered and signed up, that at one point at least will get this, are from very many different kind of countries, and we're very pleased to see that, and also from a very widespread across the sectors. So we're very pleased with that. Thank you, both for those who signed up, but also especially for those of you who are here. We hope for a very good conversation today. Maybe I forgot to mention who I am. I am Hilde Redder-Mamsen, and I work here at the Secretariat of the Nordic Sustainable Construction, which I'm part of running together with many other good colleagues. And I'm based here in the Danish Authority of Social Services and Housing. And here is the launch, at least the webinar part of the launch of our Inspiration Catalogue. The content of the catalog is what you see here. The EU Commissioner for Housing and Energy, Dan Jørgensen, also put his words on why he thinks it's very important. And then we have the rest that you can see on the screen that we will go a bit further into today. The aim of the catalog is really to show that a lot of things are going on, and we hope that it can bring inspiration across the Nordics, but also beyond the Nordics. It's really inspired by this hierarchy of resource-efficient construction that aims at utilizing the existing to the extent possible, remember and motivate to maintain and care the buildings. If needed, then renovate, and if needed even more, then transformate. And if necessary, you can extend the existing. And then the last option should be, but it can be necessary, to build new, and then do that with low carbon resources, which could be reuse or bio based construction products. The 5 strategic action areas that we have defined, we have been talking about different ones. Now we have defined 5 areas we think one has to consider when you look into this theme, and they are the following. So one, mapping the existing building stock, really to understand what is the context, to get some data on what are we working with, what is happening in the field. And then the second, prioritize the maintenance and efficient use. There's a lot of opportunities of extending the lifetime of the building, but also to have a better use of the square meters that are there. And the third is to drive renovation instead of unnecessary demolition. And one way there is try to see how can we remove the barriers that are there to make renovation. And the fourth is enabling change use efficiently. And here the target is again to reduce the unnecessary demolition, but also make it as feasible as possible to make a changed use of a building. And then the last is renovating for the future, where we want stakeholders to consider the design flexibility and efficiency, and also to what extent there is design for disassemble and reuse. So all the cases we have are gathered in within these 5 strategic action areas. We have really gathered policy measures and case examples from across the Nordic region, but also from the EU, because we see that there's a lot of things to gain inspiration from. We wanted to categorize these policy measures as they can be quite different what is possible. So some of them are, if you can say, pure regulation or regulatory policies. Others are economic policies. And then there are some we call information or organizational policies. And then there's a bigger box that's focusing on research and analytics that we will also dig into today. So the first strategic focus area is this mapping of the existing building stock. And I'm very pleased that we have some very good cases for this. There are several cases, but the one that you will know more about today are the 2 highlighted here. And therefore, I'm really pleased now to present and give the floor to Mika Kotaniemi, who's a director at Rakli, the Finnish Association of Building Owners and Construction Clients. So Mika, please, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. So honored to be here today, talking to you about Helsinki Research Forum, which is a kind of research consortium I facilitate within Rakli. If you take the next slide, so few words about Rakli. We are an association of professional property owners in Finland. So you find the equivalent association in all of your countries, such as Fastighetsägarna in Sweden or Ejendoms Denmark in Denmark, and Norsk Eiendom in Norway, in case there are Norwegians here. So please, the next slide. I'm conscious that we have a limited time here. So Helsinki Research Forum, as said, is a research consortium which gathers and produces market information on office properties in Helsinki. The office properties in Finland have suffered from long-term structural vacancy. So there has been approx 1 million euros of empty office space since 2009 or something, close to 20 years. And the market information has traditionally been very fragmented. So you can find information about vacancy in general, but we wanted around 2021, when we started this, take it on the next level to increase the quality of the data and availability. So we gathered 6 consultancies who most of them operate in all Nordic countries, such as CBR Retail, Cushman & Wakefield, Regal, Colliers, and there's a local one called KTI. And we convene 4 times per year to put that data together. And the scope of research as of today is, well, first of all, definition of the main office areas. We draw a map. Definition of grading. So we grade separately grade A office stock and the rest of the market. Well, the overall leasable office stock is something we gather information on, and the most important thing is and in the context of this presentation, is the vacant office space and net take-up. So please, you can take the next slide. The data is, as said, gathered from the consultancies, and it's non-confidential information that is in general, it's rent rolls that these consultancies gather as side product of running their services, such as leasing or transaction or property management. And on those assets, these consultancies don't cover. We find information in publicly available websites. And by requirement of the competition law, all the data we produce is made public, so including the database. And that's kind of the beauty of the model we operate this market research venture. That is publicly available, so it can be used by without any cost for property developers, urban planners, other public entities, etc., or market information services. So there are some example of the latest publication we have made. So first of all, there's on the left-hand side you find a map that provides broad level of the information about vacancies we have. So for instance, there are two areas, one called Pitäjänmäki, one called Sörnäinen, where the vacancy rate exceeds 25%. We have the same information in a table format on the right-hand side. So you have the vacancy rates and also the vacant office square meters. And then please, next slide. Yes, we produce also time series, so the market participants can see where the trend is. Unfortunately, the trend has been upwards for quite some time, but also it's interesting to see the differentiation between grade A offices and non-grade A. So the best stock is still relatively well leased, but the non-grade A office stock, the vacancy is exceeding 20%. And please, next slide. So this is probably the main product, which is very useful for many. So this is the database. We have this just an extract, but in a similar format, we have all the data we have gathered since 2021. So historic information on asset level about the vacancy and office area. So people know actually where the vacancy comes and where, for instance, property developers or consultancies can identify properties that are interesting from conversion project point of view, for instance. So try to meet the time schedule, but I hope you find this interesting, and please.
Thank you so much, Mika, for sharing this I think it's spot on for the focus area on mapping and getting the data done, and then you can act from there. So thank you very much for me, at least, this inspiring example. Thank you. And now I'll give the word on to Heidi Hakastas, Senior Architect from the Ministry of Environment. Thank you very much for being here, Heidi, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hele. So I'm telling you about a study that was published only 2 weeks ago. It's quite brand new, and it was conducted by Doctor of Science Tarja Häkkinen. And as a starting point of this study is the increasing number of underused and empty buildings in the whole of Finland. And this empty building is kind of blind spot in our sustainable building policies. There are no ways to have an impact on those in our legislation. So in this study, we wanted to roughly assess the climate impact of different future scenarios of these buildings. Next slide, please. So the objective of the study was to assess the potential climate emissions impact of vacant buildings and buildings at risk of demolition. The project started by estimating the volume of demolitions and the amount of vacant building stock. After that, we compared current practices of demolition and so on with key circular economy practices like reuse of building structures and continued use of vacant buildings through renovation and adaptive reuse. The focus in this study was on embodied emissions and carbon storage. The building types that were covered in this study were residential buildings, office buildings in the Helsinki metropolitan area that Mika was just telling about, and social and healthcare buildings and educational buildings. So these are not all the buildings, but these building categories. Next slide, please. So here you can see a graph estimation of the volume of the vacant buildings of different use categories. Totally, these categories cover 17.6 million square meters of floor space. And how much is it? It equals around 3.4% of total building stock. So it's not a small amount of our building stock. But I have to still raise out that the figures, that it was very difficult to find the figures behind these figures here, and it's one thing to work on in the future also. Next slide, please. So here are the the key findings that we found from the study. There are lots of new information, but here are some key points. So we found out that the number of demolished buildings has almost doubled from the beginning of this century to these days. And in 2020s, the ratio of demolished floor area to newly built floor area has averaged about nearly 30%. So, and by number, the buildings that are demolished are mainly timber buildings, but by floor area, concrete buildings account the highest volume. We found that the share of vacant buildings is increasing all the time, and the key reasons behind that are regional segregation, administrative changes, and changing modes of working. A conclusion from the climate assessment is that the adaptive reuse of buildings and reuse of materials have a big impact on expected CO emissions, and in that order, this adaptive reuse is of course a bit larger impact. And to illustrate the size of the climate impact, we compared saving potential of carbon footprint of the metropolitan area vacant offices that Mika was also telling about, and 1/5 of the vacant social and healthcare buildings in Finland to emissions created in new building annually, and found out that it equals 2 million square meters of new construction, which equals 40% of embodied carbon, of embodied and construction phase carbon of 1 year construction volume. And then to recommendations. As recommendations, this study suggests that we should more use incentives for exploring and comparing alternative approaches to demolition, make this potential climate impact of these solutions and projects visible when we talk about the existing building stock, and it could be done by climate declarations, which is used in all of the, for example, in Nordic countries. We should provide more and better data of vacant and underused buildings, and we should also consider other aspects that economic and technical aspects, and also others than environmental aspect. We should also consider cultural and social aspects when they made judgments and decisions on existing buildings, and they like what to do with them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Hadi, and thank you both for being very much on time. A very good example, I think, of how you tried to dig out some of the data and also what kind of opportunities that gives you. Thank you very much for sharing this insightful presentations. Now we move to the next strategic focus area, prioritizing maintenance and efficient use. And here we have a lot of good cases and, of course, and examples. It's never easy to choose, but it's been important for us to have examples that are different from different part of the value chain and different part of our region, Nordic region. So I'm very pleased to give the floor now to Nuka, who's a project manager at the Ministry of Housing, Infrastructure and Other Districts in Greenland. Please, Nuka, the floor is yours. Not hear you right now.
Thank you. I will be presenting two initiatives that we have here in the government of Greenland, which is Together for Healthy Homes. That is a renovation effort and modernizing and improving old self-built houses, which is currently in the planning stage. So the renovation effort. Many tenants of publicly owned housing experience leaky and worn out houses, which is next slide, due to a 2.5 billion Danish kroner renovation backlog, which is about 1/3 of a billion euros. And so in the next slide, we have made a 20-year plan split into 3 phases, where in the first phase we are increasing the annual maintenance budget to the actual demand, and in phase 2 we are catching up to the renovation backlog, and in phase 3 there is no renovation backlog. Next slide. So the 2.5 billion Danish kroner figure was estimated by giving a grade to each building part in every building from 1 to 5, where if it has 1 to 2 points, there is no renovation backlog and will first be included in phase 2. 2.5 to 4 points, there is a renovation backlog and is included in phase 1. And 4.5 to 5 points, the building is mature for demolition and not included in the renovation effort. Next slide. So currently the annual maintenance budget is 35 million Danish kroner, where the actual demand is 150 million kroner annually. And in the next slide, to address this, the rent will be adjusted by 3.6% annually from 2027 to 2041. And by 2044, we are planning to have caught up with the renovation backlog. And in the next slide, I will be talking about the old self-built houses. These are houses that were built by the owners themselves, but financed by the government of Greenland. There's about 1,100 houses all around the coast of Greenland, built between 1973 and 1999. And in the next slide, I can tell you that they also experience leaky and worn out building parts due to a lack of maintenance, which we think is because of a lack of feeling of ownership. And in addition to those problems, they also have outdated heating systems like the picture shown above, which is a ship's furnace. And to address this, in the next slide, we are planning to replace those heating systems with more modern oil heaters, which would require that we also install piping and radiators. And also we will be replacing old windows and external doors with more energy efficient ones, and also post-insulating the building envelope so that the owners can have a cheaper or lower cost of heating. And in the next slide, I can tell you that there's about a 40% decrease in energy demand with these measures. And in the next slides, there's this corresponds to about 66% decrease in oil demand due to more efficient heaters. Yeah, Brianna, thank you.
Thank you, Nuka, for a very interesting presentation and very specific. It's interesting with the phases you have and the initiatives you're digging into to renovate and do what you can to make better use of the buildings you have. Thank you very much for this presentation. And now I'm very pleased to give the floor to Robin Rushid Al-Salihid, who's the founder of Vacanza. Please, Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helle, and hello, everyone. My name is Robin Rushd Al-Salehi, and I'm an urban planner and sustainability specialist that decided to drop my career as a chief sustainability officer at a real estate company here in Sweden and instead focus on the core problem in the real estate sector, namely resource consumption. Today, as you probably know or don't know, around 0.7% of the world's landmass is urbanized. Next, we have tripled the amount of resources humanity consumes from about 30 billion tons to 107 billion tons per year between the 70s until now. Next, exactly. The construction and real estate sector consumes about 50% of these resources every year and generates 40% of all solid waste. In the world today, we have about 253 billion square meters of floor space, and projections show us that we will have around 465 billion square meters by 2060. And during the same period, as much as 20% of the existing square meters will probably be demolished. I hope not, but probably, according to estimates. And we will consume about 160 billion tons of resources by 2060. If we will manage this with the sustainable transition, I don't know if these projections continue. We'll see. But considering all of this, next, it is safe to say that I was right, quite right, 10 years ago when I did my TEDx and said the words that we are constructing the destruction of our world. And it is unfortunately precisely what we're doing when we are expanding our cities globally. Cities that are fundamentally resource-consuming entities. And cities that we have to rethink how we use and operate. And there is actually one logical solution to all of this that is right in front of us. And that is, next, that we need to break with the functionalistic city, where we live in one place, go to school in another place, go to work in a third place, buy what we need in the fourth place, and spend our spare time in the fifth place. Places that are used a couple of hours each day and stand vacant the rest of the day. Before the pandemic, office spaces were used as little as 10% of the time, schools about 20% of the time, at least in Sweden, and even, unfortunately, even less so today. So the solution is to use everything multifunctionally. We need to start sharing and optimizing the already built environment. For example, in Sweden, we have about 90 million square meters used by the state and municipalities. And if these spaces are used only 50% of the time, imagine what would happen if we started optimizing these spaces. We could use them as if they were 180 million square, square meters, if we could double the usage, or 270 million square meters if we could triple it. We don't need to construct anything at all, really. Next. And because of this enormously untapped potential, I founded the facilities sharing platform Vacanza.se, a tenant-to-tenant marketplace where tenants can sublease their premises to each other and that way increase the resource efficiency of spaces. Today, we have about 200,000 square meters in Sweden, 16 different facility types, and we help companies, associations, and organizations with finding and subleasing facilities, spaces that can be used during the day, evenings, weekends, spaces that should be used from dusk to dawn. And for your information, we're planning on expanding our marketplace to other Nordic countries this year, so check out vacanza.se and contact me if you want to. Next. And besides the marketplace, we're also creating new services in order to help tenants understand their actual usage and give suggestions on what to optimize. Perhaps they have to renovate some part of their space. Perhaps they have to rethink how to organize themselves. Perhaps they have too much space and need to downsize or sublease. Next. Whatever the goal is, we want to make sure that tenants, but also property owners that want to measure data points when it comes to resource efficiency, have the tools needed to do so. We have developed tools like this calculator, space calculator, but also specific forms in order to make qualitative measurements of how the users view their usage. To find the discrepancy between the actual use and the perceived usage. And when it comes to the actual usage, we also use people counting sensors. Next. People counting sensors. There's a small lag, I think, between the next. Oh, no, sorry. Thank you, Helle. People counting sensors to produce hard facts about the actual usage and identifying what tenants could do to optimize their spaces. So let's stop constructing unnecessary and unsustainable square meters. Let's stop demolishing what we have and instead start sharing facilities for sustainable cities. Next.
Thank you very much.
I hope that was 5 minutes.
That was 5 minutes. Well done.
Great. Pitching.
Thank you very much, Robin, for sharing this solution that you've been part of creating. And that also, I think, gives a good example of a solution that can help utilize the existing in a better way. So thank you for your 2 cases on how to prioritize maintenance and efficient use. So now we move to the next strategic focus area. And remember, if you have questions or questions, then you put them in the chat and then we'll look through them and we'll select some for the last part of the Q&A. And also welcome to those of you who have joined now. So this third strategic focus area of our catalog, Inspiration Catalogue, is focusing on how can we motivate to renovate instead of unnecessary demolition. And there are several good examples here again, but we will start with Hannah from Norway, who will share their regulatory attempt with us. So I'm pleased now to introduce to you Hannah from DBCO. Hannah, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helle. The fire alarm in our office just went off, so this presentation will be outside.
You can do with the fire alarms.
Yeah. But yeah, as been said, I work in the Norwegian Building Authority, and our role is to support the development of safe, high quality, and environmentally friendly buildings through developing regulations and guidance. And the topic of this section is how to promote renovation instead of demolition. And I will talk about how the Norwegian regulation, more specifically, how an exemption provision introduced in 2023 in the Norwegian Planning and Building Act can better use of existing buildings. So the Norwegian government has set a target of delivering 130,000 new residential homes within 2030. And this is a key priority because we are currently not building fast enough to meet housing needs. And the construction industry is facing challenging conditions with high material costs and increasing taxes. And at the same time, many existing buildings stand empty and are underused. And this represents a large and often overlooked potential. It is estimated that around 8% of the existing buildings will still be standing in 2050, which means that what we choose to do with existing buildings are very important. And renovating buildings instead of demolishing them can significantly reduce the use of virgin materials, waste, and carbon emissions. And that is why existing buildings is such a part of important part of the solution. So next, please. The regulatory framework is there to make sure that buildings are safe and healthy to use and that they keep a good quality. And in Norway, large parts of the building regulation are designed with new buildings in mind. And therefore, it is made clear in the Planning and Building Act that when renovating existing buildings, only relevant requirements should apply. And this provision was adopted to avoid the situations where small changes to a building would trigger full upgrade to new build standards. Yes. But requirements relevant to the measure may still be challenging to fulfill when working on an existing building, and therefore local building authorities have since 2023 had authority to grant full or partial exemptions from technical requirements under the Planning and Building Act, as long as the proposed changes are considered appropriate with regards to safety, health, and the environment. And the intention here is to promote better use of existing buildings. So next, please. To use this exemption, projects needs to submit an application to the municipality setting out why an exemption should be made. And when the municipalities are assessing whether the application should go through, they shall emphasize these bullet points. So the condition and location of the building, and the factors that can reduce negative consequences. For example, if fire safety is increased, even though it's not possible to meet all requirements. And I want to highlight the last one. So next, please. The benefits achieved through the measure. And these benefits can include reduced carbon emissions or lower resource use, which is very relevant for existing buildings. So next. Yeah, but experiences so far indicates that the exemption provision has been used to a limited extent, and that there is also a big variety between how the provision is understood and applied across local building authorities. So the lack of clear and established examples of approved practices may lead to uncertainty among developers, meaning that this provision isn't used as much as it could be. So that's why the Norwegian Building Authority wants to promote the use of this provision and underline that the intention of this legislation is to lower the threshold for maintaining and developing existing buildings. And this represents an important and still largely untapped potential of driving renovation instead of demolition. Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you, Hannah, for an insightful presentation of the regulation that you have made, and also the honesty about, yeah, it takes sometimes some time to make it work out there. Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to give the floor to Kirsten Mayak, who's the Chief Advisor at the Vegan Moe. Kirsten, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me here today. We have done a project together with the municipality of Copenhagen and an architect company, Nielsen Ark, in Denmark, because we were super curious about what is the actual potential for utilizing rooftops for housing compared to new build instead. And we have carried out an analysis and practical guide, and through the project that was actually supported by Bevar Mere. So I will just walk you through what our findings were. So why do we need to look into rooftop housing? We know in Copenhagen City we are almost about to grow with approximately 60,000 residents in the coming years. And we also know that we should use what we have, use the resources that we have rather than build new. So we looked into two different categories of potential areas that might be relevant for rooftop housing. We have the unused attic spaces where dwelling can be created within the existing roof volume, and then we have the flat roofs on top of the buildings on existing buildings. So we have these two categories that we looked into. Next, please. Overall purpose of this exercise was actually to identify what are the additional housing quantity, and also in order to qualify that, looking into what are the impact in terms of emissions, how is it balanced compared to building new dwellings, and also looking into the cost, social cost, what are the impacts of that, taking into account both the demolition and construction and site and everything. And then also what was super important for us was actually to go into deep dialogue with the sector, the regulators, the technical advisors, building owners, associations, and so on, to identify what are the barriers. Because we do know that there are a bunch of barriers, and it's not an easy exercise to do rooftop housing. So we had a huge interview section and stakeholder engagement in order to qualify these barriers. And then based on those quantifications of the emissions and cost, and also the number of rooftop potential, come up with specific recommendations and tools for building owners and professionals and tenants and regulators and municipalities, what can actually ease the way towards more rooftop housing. Next, please. So the final deliverable was actually a background report where you can have a deep dive and look into the analysis, and then a very concrete and user-friendly guide, practical guide for housing owners and professionals and so on. Next, please. So what we started by having a potential of approximately 1.5 million square meters, and it was actually narrowed down to a potential of 400,000 square meters by looking into the potential, doing some calculations, aerial views, and in general looking into what are the net area that is actually possible to establish rooftop housing. Because if you just take a broad look, you see the square meters, you will have a slightly higher potential, but looking into more details, you would actually see that it's slightly lower. So approximately 400,000 square meters were identified within the city of Copenhagen in the existing building stock, and that corresponds to approximately less than 5,000 new dwellings with an average square meter area of 85 square meters. Next, please. And for that, we also, as I said, did this climate impact assessment, looking into an apartment of 120 square meters, compared it to what happens actually if we build the same apartment in new building. And we did that calculation for, of course, for the rooftop dwelling, but then also compared it to what we have as a regulatory boundary in Denmark, both looking into if we build it as a low E class, but also just meeting the compliance within the building regulation. And we can see that we will be able to save approximately 50%, 40 to 50%, not as is stated here, 50 to 60, but 40 to 60% of the emission by utilizing the existing building stock to create more housing and dwellings. And next, please. And that also goes for the cost and the socioeconomic perspective, that it is also a more cost efficient case. And looking at the total potential in Copenhagen, it would actually implies a 10 billion Danish crown saving by using and establishing rooftop housing compared to building new dwellings around in the city. Next, please. And then, yeah, a lot of barriers were identified here, some of them. So we actually pooled it in a kind of saying what are the regulatory and permitting barriers, and what are the technical barriers, looking into the structural, fire regulation, all of that also. And what are the economic and organizational setup barriers by having tenants and owners, and how do we go along with that? And then also what are the barriers related to the construction process, and how much disturbance are we actually occurring for the tenants and the people living in the building and just below the roof areas and so on. Next, please. And that leads us to come up with the next slide. Okay. Previous. Yeah, that one. To come up with some key recommendations that is formulated in our guide, targeted municipalities. What are the recommendations for those? What are the recommendations overall for professionals like myself? And how can we assist the building owners and housing associations to have more of these? So we have this very, very practical guide. Unfortunately, it's only in Danish. Hopefully it will be translated into English, but I think it's a super strong tool to maybe promote some of these potentials. Next slide. So we do see an opportunity, but we also need to change our mindset. But there are definitely potentials, and we can see it in the city of Copenhagen. Just as an example, this is not a political decision, but it's just to take it as a case example to share with others. Next, please. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and for very insightful and specific deep dive into the potentials in the rooftops in Copenhagen. Thank you for sharing that with us. And that concludes actually our focus on driving renovation instead of unnecessary demolition. Thank you for the examples. And as said, there are more good examples in the catalog. But now we move to the next strategic focus area, enabling changed use efficiently. And of course, it's very linked to the first one, but this is really where you change, maybe it was an office building, and then you change the use of that building into something else. Examples of that. And here we have 2 good cases that will be shared with us. I'm very much looking forward to. And the first one is from Iceland, and it's Elin Dorald. I didn't say that often, huh? Sorry, who is from the Icelandic Housing, Construction and Planning Authority. Welcome, Elin, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helle, and good morning. You can please go to the next slide. I will briefly share part of the Icelandic perspective on optimizing the use of existing buildings. And in Iceland, we are facing increasing housing demand, while at the same time wanting to reduce the carbon emission from the construction sector. And this creates a clear need to rethink how we approach development, and how we can make better use of the square meters we already have rather than relying solely on new construction. Next slide, please. This brings us to the opportunity. By reducing barriers for change of use and improving the utilization of existing buildings, we can unlock multiple benefits at once. We can increase housing supply without new construction, reduce emissions, and make more efficient use of resources. In particular, converting existing buildings, such as office buildings, into housing has a strong potential. So this is not only a technical possibility, but also an important opportunity that supports both the climate goals and housing needs. However, in practice, these projects are often more difficult than they need to be. Next slide, please. What we see here in Iceland is that the main barriers are often not the technical ones, but related to planning, regulation, and processes. Firstly, planning. Zoning does not always allow for residential use, and changing plans can be both very time-consuming and uncertain. Secondly, building regulations and technical requirements. Many requirements are designed for new buildings, which can make adapting the existing buildings unnecessarily complex and costly. And third one, process-related challenges. There is often a lack of clear guidance and predictable procedures, creating this uncertainty for both the developers and the municipalities. And as a result, even when there's a clear potential to reuse a building, renovation or change of use can become less attractive than demolition and new construction. Next slide, please. To move forward, we need to create the right conditions to enable this change of use, and some barriers can already be addressed today, and we are now beginning to develop like a practical guidance with clearer interpretations of the regulations and more standardized and predictable processes for both the developers and the municipalities. At the same time, broader changes are also needed, including more flexibility in the planning, simpler zoning processes, and building regulations that better reflect the realities of the existing buildings. The overall goal is to shorten timelines, reduce this uncertainty, and make reuse feasible at a larger scale. Because, of course, in the end, unlocking these potentials of the existing buildings is not mainly about technical limitations. It is about creating this right framework to make reuse possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elin, for an insightful and to the point presentation of some of the things that you're working on to enable this and make it, more predictable, is what I heard. Thank you. And now we move to Kalevi Sarela from Sweco. I'll give the floor to you, and you'll have a specific example that you've digged into on how to convert office buildings into houses. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Helle, for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here. So my name is Kalevi Sarela, and I'm currently working as data center design lead in Sweco, Finland. But in 2023, I worked at Ramboll, Finland, where I led a study on converting office buildings into housing. So next, please. As Mika Kotaniemi and Harri Hakaste earlier showed, occupancy rates of office buildings in Finland have declined in recent years, and converting underutilized buildings for residential or accommodation use offers a way to extend their lifespan. And the study was commissioned by the Ministry of the Environment and, as said, carried out by Ramboll Finland. and it identified key factors that either promote or hinder the conversion of office buildings into housing, hotels, student housing, and care facilities. And it's important to mention that the project examined building conversions from three main perspectives that were existing building stock, urban structure and zoning, and forward-looking planning of new construction. Next, please. The project structured the preconditions for building conversions into four main categories, as presented in the chart, and those are location and site, building and spaces, structures and services, regulations and processes. And each category included several subcategories, and for each of these, the key factors affecting feasibility of conversions were identified. Next, please. The study also examined 6 carefully selected case studies, and the cases were chosen to ensure both general applicability and diversity. And of course, most of them were located in the capital area of Finland. Next, please. The conclusions of the study were following. So the efficient use of existing building stock supports circular economy principles and climate goals. Then location plays a significant role in the financial feasibility of conversion projects. I think that's important. Urban planning and decision-making require collaboration and flexibility, as stated also in the previous presentation. And conversion projects often need tailored solutions. And finally, good property maintenance improves the conditions for successful conversions. And next, please. And finally, the recommendations. So municipalities should be actively involved in the development efforts, and establishing common guidelines that allow flexibility would support municipal decision-making. Then, well, not quite yet, then strengthening collaboration between different stakeholders would benefit the potential conversion projects. And finally, promoting responsible property maintenance would lay the foundation for future conversions. And then next, please. Yes, and that's all. If you have further questions, please be in contact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kalevi, for an interesting presentation of some of the potentials you identified. And it's interesting with the categories that you put it into. There's many ways to approach it and to try to find out how to break through the barriers. Thank you for those and the recommendations and for keeping the time well.
Thank you.
I just want to remind you all who are there, please write in the chat if you have questions, and if possible, also write it who it's for, so we know who to put the question for. Everyone can write it. Also those who have presented, maybe not questions to yourself, but otherwise. Yes, and that finished our strategic focus area 4, enabling change use efficiently. A very interesting strategic focus area, if you ask me. They are all interesting, of course. And then the last one, this one, renovating for the future. And here it's really looking into how can we design optimize when we both renovate and maybe also if we build new, and then the thinking of design for disassemble. What can we improve? And here we have a very interesting, I think, case or example, policy measure example from DBK, and it's you, Hannah, again, and then we'll have another one from Moritz afterwards. So please, Hannah Katarina Walter. Senior engineer from DBK, the floor is yours. Again, I hope you're okay with the fire alarm. It was nice to see blue sky.
Back inside now, so that's good. But yeah, thank you, Helle. So in this section, I will talk about design for disassembly and how that is promoted through the Norwegian building regulation. And I'll try to give an overview of why this is an important topic when renovating for the future and transitioning into a more circular economy. Go next, please. So design for disassembly may sound like a new concept, but in many of the Nordic countries, this way of thinking is actually has very strong historical roots. So as an example, log buildings, such as the one in the picture, were common in Norway well into the early 1900s. And these buildings were often made to be dismantled, moved, and reassembled, and materials were carefully taken care of and reused because they were very valuable. And today we have a quite different situation. Modern buildings are often made of complex structures, composite materials, and permanent connections, which makes disassembly and reuse hard or difficult today. And in many ways, what we're trying to do today is to rediscover a way of thinking about the value of materials and designing buildings so that materials and buildings can stay in use for as long as possible. And this is, in practical terms, what circular economy is all about. And the Norwegian ambition aiming for a transition into circularity thinking is closely aligned with the EU. Today, Norway's circular percentage within the built environment is only around 7%, which means that materials end up as waste way too quickly. And once again, the construction sector is one of the largest consumers of materials and a major source of waste and emissions. And a change within this sector will have a great impact on sustainability goals. Next slide, please. So to send a signal to the construction industry that this topic matters in the transition towards a low-carbon society, a requirement stating that buildings shall be designed and constructed to facilitate future disassembly was introduced in the Norwegian regulations in 2022. And because projects are very different, and to avoid that the requirements would be so strict and costly that it would prevent projects from moving forward, it was specified that the requirement applies when this can be achieved within a practical and economically reasonable framework. This requirement is a functional rather than prescriptive one, which means that it does not mandate specific solutions, but it leaves room for different technical approaches and material choices, such as reversible connections, modular systems, or other design strategies. So next slide. And in the guidance to the regulation, here it is clarified how the requirements should be understood. And here it is stated that considerations related to design for disassembly shall be documented as part of the design process. And it is also highlighted that choices of fastening methods are particularly important for enabling future disassembly. Next. But for future reuse to be feasible, it is not sufficient that building components can be dismantled. For future reuse, material choices could be is very important. And for example, materials should be of a quality that allows them to have a long service life, and they must not contain any hazardous substances. And these aspects are regulated through other requirements in the building regulation. Next. So the requirement is intended to send a signal. However, because it includes this condition related to practical and economically reasonable solutions, there is room for subjective interpretation. And since we currently do not have any specific requirement of collecting or assessing documentation related to design for disassembly, we have to acknowledge that the actual effect of the requirement when it comes to simulating future reuse is still uncertain. But at the same time, the intention of this requirement is clear. It is to highlight the importance of this topic and give projects room to develop good and practical solutions that can enable reuse and circularity in the future. And we have a few very good examples of circular projects in Norway, and we will hear from one now in the next section. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah, for this presentation. And it's interesting how you have said that it has to be considered, but of course with economic and practical considerations, and then you see how the market takes it up. Very interesting. Yes, and that was a good lead over to you, Moritz Groba, a partner in Oslo 3, and you are the one who are allowed to have a lot of slides. So because you had some, and am I still sharing? Yeah, no. So I'll give the floor to you, and you can present, please.
Thank you, Helle. Hello, everybody. I hope you see my screen now. Let's see. Yes. To tackle the global building sector CO2 emissions, which accounts for around 40% globally, we need to think differently.
Sorry, Maurice, maybe could you just share again?
Do you see now?
Do you see? No, maybe just try once more.
Okay, I have to try. Let's see. Does it work now?
It is, yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, to tackle the global buildings CO2 emissions, which account for around 40%, we need to think differently. Timber is not only a renewable building material, it also represents the only existing natural carbon capture and storage process available to us, and one that comes free of charge, photosynthesis. So over their lifetime, trees absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and store it within their structure. By using timber in construction, by designing buildings to last as long as possible, our cities themselves can become carbon storage systems. The more robust, flexible and adaptable a building is to changing user needs, the longer that carbon remains stored, something that should be considered in greenhouse gas emissions calculations. But this concept requires a modular approach. Layouts and components should be adaptable, and elements that are removed should be reusable in other projects, or at worst, recyclable back into raw materials. Also, the technical systems need to be reimagined. Natural ventilation, for example, or a reduced ductwork should be prioritized, and systems should be flexible enough to adapt to changing layouts. Using natural materials exposed in interior spaces can also improve indoor climate and overall well-being. Finally, we must design buildings that people enjoy walking by, living in and working in. This significantly increases the likelihood that they will be preserved for decades, if not centuries. In Hasle in northeastern Oslo, we sought to apply this approach in a 3,000 square meter office building called Hasle 3. The plan layout is organized around the central core, enabling up to 2 independent tenants per floor. The structure grid is optimized for CLT and glulam spans at approximately 5 by 5 meters. The wooden glulam beams are not continuous, instead a gap is introduced at the center. This is made possible by utilizing cross-laminated timber elements' secondary load-bearing capacity, and this gap allows for greater flexibility in routing ducts, as they are not constrained by perforations in the beams. And at the same time, non-perforated beams have a significantly higher reuse potential. A suspended acoustic absorber keeps these installations accessible. The beams and columns are connected using wooden dowels, which replace many of the steel-slotted plate and dowel connectors commonly used in such joints. These dowels are easily driven into pre-drilled holes into the beams to secure the connection. The CLT elements are sized as large as possible while still accounting for transportation limits, approximately 3.5 by 15 meters. This ensures an economical and material efficient construction while also increasing reuse potential. These elements are joined using so-called wooden X-fix connectors. Those are dovetail joints cut diagonally in two that pull and fasten adjacent CLT elements together. They can be removed later to allow for disassembly. The entire building is prefabricated, with each component assigned its own ID and described in the erection manual. This high degree of prefabrication also results in an efficient construction process, where the main timber structure here was erected in just 4.5 weeks. The completed primary timber structure allows for straightforward installation of technical systems. Like in the gap between the beams, ducts, pipes, and other surfaces can be mounted using simple wood screws. The floor is designed as a raised technical system on supports with integrated impact sound isolation. It's a Swedish system called Granap, where cables run beneath the floor and remain easily accessible. The facade consists of prefabricated timber frame elements with wood fiber isolation. The prefabricated exterior cladding elements made of wood shingles are installed afterwards. The facade itself reflects the general and adaptable grid of the interior. The interior wood panels are fastened with wooden nails known as lignolock, which ensure that there are no metal residues in the panels after disassembly, which also increases their reuse value. The result of these choices is an interior defined by warm natural materials such as wood, cork, and wool carpets. Structural details and fasteners are left visible, expressing how the building is assembled. The tenant, Red Barna, or Save the Children, extended the building's concept into their interior design by reusing existing furniture. Tables were adapted to fit the new layout, while other pieces were refurbished, sent to a so-called furniture spa, and were returned with a renewed guarantee. The result of this multidisciplinary planning process is a healthy, sustainable building designed for disassembly, one that people are proud ambassadors of and enjoy working in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moritz, for very nice to see some of the examples. I think sometimes people ask, well, what is design for disassembly? How does it look? And like you say, Hannah, there are a lot of old traditions where we know it from, but what about the modern part and time and money and all of that included? But thank you very much. It worked perfectly. And thank you all for having some really nice and to the point, I think, presentations and to the time also. And this actually leaves us with good time for the Q&A. I don't know if there's any new, but otherwise, Moritz, you sent one to, I think it was maybe to Kirsten. Could you please just say it out loud? And then if there are others, please write it in the chat or put up your hand. Please, Moritz.
Yeah, I was quite active. I actually sent two, but I can begin with the one to Kirsten because I think the topic of building on top is right on point and something that we also have been looking at a lot here in Norway, in Oslo, where we have a lot of redensification potential. But talking to investors that kind of want to go to get going with those projects, they see that there are a lot of technical demands that make it often nearly impossible kind of to get this done. Namely, what you also kind of touched upon is the technical requirements that, for example, you have to upgrade the fire protection system of the existing building below to the newest standards, which if you have kind of a multi-party user group, like different people owning their own flat, which is the most common form here in Norway, then it's nearly impossible kind of to get everybody on board kind of to having a new sprinkler system installed in their houses. Are there any strategies in other Scandinavian countries that might facilitate kind of building on top by somehow having exemptions from those rules once you build on top?
Well, yes, I think you touch two very important aspects. One is the democracy within the building association, that everybody should agree that this is a super nice idea to establish a new apartment at the very top. because they might not necessarily benefit from that, only they might be disturbed. So that's one thing. And then you have the technical challenges also. In Denmark, we do also have requirements, of course, for sprinkler and for fire safety. But you are able to obtain a kind of dispensation from the municipality or regulator or building authority if you establish the necessary fire escape routes by upgrading, for instance, the existing stairwells, and then you also have a secondary stairwell, and then of course also submit the needed fire safety documentation. But then it very much depends on the height of the building. If you are, I think, above 22 meters, then it's needed to have sprinkler systems in the entire building, and that also corresponds to 5 stories. But it is possible to actually obtain dispensation. But it is, yeah, and fire is only one thing. Then you have the structural issues also. What about the structure below, the reinforcement and all of that? So there's a lot of technical obstacles, but it can be solved in some cases. But of course, sometimes it might be very expensive, too expensive, that then it doesn't make sense. But we do see flexibility in the local building authority in Denmark.
Thank you for the elaboration, and yeah, it's important with this. Then Ronald M. Ragoash. Sorry, I'm not very good at pronouncing the names. You had a question. Could you please say it? Maybe put your camera on and say where you're from and ask the question. If you're still with us, Ronald. Otherwise, I can read it out. Sorry, changing any computers to get it. Okay, so maybe this question is for you if you're not there, Ronald. Oh, otherwise I'll definitely read it out. Maybe it was for you, Harry. A person is wondering how would renovation and maybe repurposing compare with demolition in terms of economic case and emission profile. I would like to hear about demolition audits. So it's a wide question, but of course you can maybe give input to it.
Yeah, we would very much like to know also how it impact. What's the impact? And actually, we have a project, a draft of project that we are kind of seeking for funding from the government at the moment, where we would study the economic, the kind of changes or differences between this circular economy solutions and this linear economy solutions. And we have 2 kind of cases that we would like to collect information. One is exactly what we are talking about, this reusing these existing spaces, but the other one is about this reusing of these building materials. And I hope that we get the funding, but at the moment we unfortunately don't have any information on that yet. We know that it's more expensive at the moment is circular economy solutions than this linear economic solutions, but we would like to have more information on that.
Thank you for the elaboration, and good luck with the project and something.
Yeah, and also I would like to ask whether other colleagues, Nordic colleagues, have any this kind of projects going on, and even because in this project we are also kind of scanning all the information that is already available on this issue.
Yeah, it is part of the. Oh, maybe Nuka, you have a. Was that a comment? Do you have a comment to it? No. Anyone is welcome, but in the Nordic Sustainable Construction Program and the work package, there is a focus on reused product, and of course that somehow relates to the demolition part. that maybe it will give some insights to it. It's something that you can follow us on LinkedIn and you'll find more information about it. And I think this information will come out rather soon. So hopefully that will give some insights. I know from the Danish side, we would have more insight, but currently, because we're still in government negotiations, we don't contribute with specific input, unfortunately. At the moment, we can take that another day. Then we have another question from Lawrence. Can I find it now?
I have it right here.
Maybe you can read it out.
Yeah.
Lauren.
So, yeah, Lawrence, if you want to say it yourself, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Say where you're from as well, please.
Yes, I am Lawrence Gibbons. I am a sustainability consultant from Ramboll, working in Norway, and thus very keen to ask Hannah about how DPK are following up this requirement for design for demolition, and how often it's being excluded due to the argument for practical and economic reasons.
I guess that one was for me. Yeah, so it's a good question. I'm not. I don't know if I don't think we have any statistics on how often it is left out due to economic reasons, for example. But in Norway, as for all other requirements in the technical regulation, documentation must be available if there is an inspection on the construction after the building is built. So that's the requirement. We don't have any requirement for handing it in or that it should be assessed or something, but it should be available if anyone asks. So that's how the requirement is for now.
Thank you for that.
Quick right to reply. I think what's then important is that we, within the guidance for the thing, there are references to like ISO 20887 and also Statsbyg's guidance. I would also recommend the levels guidance. I think is fairly good, but all of these become very general, and it's working out how to deal with this both at an initial stage in construction and then in the later detailing stages. And if there's maybe something for this work group to deal with is how to get that next stage of getting circular design principles into the majority of projects, not just the excellent work that firms such as Oslo 3 are doing.
That's a very good comment.
Maybe I can also add to that we are also interested in Finland about this design for disassembly and criteria for that. So if there's some kind of like a common ground for collaboration on that, we are ready for that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, all of you. I don't know, Lauren, sometimes consultants have some specific guidelines themselves and measures. So do you already have a better starting ground than the levels? Not saying that levels was not good, but you said yourself that maybe some more specific.
We can say the issue with any kind of guidance, of course, you need to make it general to apply to a lot of different projects. I think that's maybe the step we do when we are going out to clients, is that we are narrowing the number of suggestions in order that it reflects the scope of their works. It's also a lot of understanding each client's business needs, and also the fact that if to take an example of people that do commercial real estate, for them the tenant is king or queen, and if there's anything that will make a negative working environment for the tenant, then no matter how good it is for circular economy, they're not going to do it. An example to this is we sometimes recommend doing point gluing for flooring in order that you can take it up and reuse it again. But then there's the it doesn't feel as secure, or if it's wooden flooring, it makes too much vibration, and all of these practical reasons come up, and it becomes very much like it's both working on the acceptance for circularity within society more generally, and also then convincing clients that you're not going to lose out because you're doing these principles. So again, it comes back to this building up a larger catalogue of proven solutions. I don't know if that needs to be put onto the actual building constructors or if it should be placed on the side of the product manufacturers.
Thank you for that input, Lawrence. And then Patrice Boudounou, you had a question. I think it was to Maurice. Please, could you say where you're from and ask the question?
Hello, Patrice Boudounou from Swedish Wood and Industry Association in Stockholm. Yes, so the question was regarding some technical aspect. I was wondering, how did you assess the remaining structural properties of the component in the building? What method did you use? Did you use design by testing, or do you have some documents in Denmark that allows this?
You're asking Maurice, yeah?
Yeah, it's Maurice, the latest presentation.
The Norwegian case, yeah. Mm?
Yeah, sitting in Norway, but this building is a new building.
It's okay.
Thanks,
but rules are not totally the same.
No, the thing is that this building, it's a new building, so this is kind of new wooden elements that have to be assessed once taken apart. I'm not into the details, but there are buildings that are already taken into account or reusing kind of existing glulam beams, where you can kind of have a batch of glulam beams where they, I don't know, every 10th beam or something, they have to kind of check if it still kind of fulfills the expected technical terms. This, of course, kind of what we hope here is always a bit of too much of a focus on the primary structure in this building. As I was kind of trying to say in the introduction, I think the most important thing that we can do for buildings and like for this idea of disassembly is that we adapt them, that are flexible to users, that it can be a total different use scenario. It can be just another tenant once we change buildings or kind of have to change the facade. Today, this is something that emits way too much CO2. We've talked to a researcher who's looked at it, and he kind of stated that in many cases, the CO2 emissions of a refurbishment of an existing building can overgo the initial CO2 emissions kind of done when kind of setting up the building, because you have so many materials that go right to landfill, because we just don't think enough of what is happening to the materials that we put into our buildings. They can be really nice recyclable materials, but if we glue and pour them together and they cannot be separated from each other in an effective and economical manner, then everything goes to landfill because we just mix it up, and it creates a lot of resource waste and way too high CO2 emissions. So I think that's very important kind of to look at. Even, sorry, now I'm really digressing from your question, but that kind of that there's so many levels kind of reuse, and the primary structure is of course one. But I hope that this isn't the case in 150 years, and then of course kind of we do have to do some strength testing.
Thank you for the reply and the reflection, and also some insights from research that you had done. Thank you very much all for your questions and for the answers, and of course a warm thank to all the presenters, but also to all the other cases that and examples that we have used in the Inspiration Catalogue. And you're probably thinking, so where is it? Where can I find it? And actually, all of you who signed up for this webinar will get it with email. Tomorrow you'll also get the slides. That's at least our plan tomorrow. And there you can dig more into the Inspiration Catalogue. So today we hope that you will take in all the I don't know, I hope you got inspired. That was the aim with the catalog. I think all of us amongst each other are definitely much more aware of what's happening in all the countries, both amongst authorities, but also in the sector. And that's, of course, a very beneficial step towards the aim of using the existing materials better. So I want to thank you for signing up and those who stayed here all the way through. And a warm thanks to all of those, you know who you are, who were behind creating the catalog. Much appreciated. Yeah, and you can follow us on LinkedIn if you like, or sign up to our newsletter. You're most welcome. So thank you for today, and stay tuned.